Hello movie nerds, and welcome back to Cinematic Sarcastic, podcast that talks all things movies and television. I'm Natalie, and I'm your host. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the movie The Pod Generation. But before I jump into it, I just wanted to give a quick sort of update note thing for everyone that listens on YouTube. All of the episodes that I have put out are now available on YouTube. We are 100% caught up and current. So from this point on, pretty much, and with the last episode that I put out with my review for Ahsoka episode 3, that was released at the same time on YouTube as it was just in regular podcast form everywhere else. So I'm going to try and figure out like a good schedule for when my YouTube videos should drop so that people can actually see them and notice them. 5 a.m. does not seem to work well on YouTube the way it does with regular podcasting. So I will sort of adjust that, but they will be released at least on the same day. So with that being said, let's jump into my review for The Pod Generation. So The Pod Generation is a new sci-fi movie. I don't even know if I would consider it sci-fi so much, but it is marked as sci-fi romance, and I don't think either of those things are particularly accurate for this film, but it is starring Emilia Clarke and Chiwetel Ejiofor, who play a married couple in what I presume is a not too distant future. And they decide to have a baby. But of course, in this sort of futurized humanity, I guess, people are no longer, or most of them are no longer having babies the old-fashioned natural way. They are instead having babies born in pods. So really what happens is Emilia Clarke's character of Rachel decides to go to this birthing center, sign them up to have a pod baby, and then just doesn't tell her husband. Throughout the entire movie, the only thing that I could really kind of keep saying to myself was these two people could not be further apart from each other in terms of who they are, what they want, what their goals are, what their motivations are. I would not, in the real world, like outside of the movie, think that this was a couple that would last in a marriage or in a relationship or would have even gotten to that point. Like, I know that there is that saying that kind of goes around the opposites attract, and you should look for in a relationship someone that is opposite of you because it'll balance you out. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I don't necessarily agree with it either. I think it is fine to have personalities that clash with one another or are opposite of one another, where you can have different strengths or different weaknesses. But at the base core, I think that everyone that is going to have like a sustainable, healthy relationship should be the same, right? You should have the same goals in life, the same wants in life, the same morals in life, that sort of thing. And Rachel's character is really 100% all in to this world where we have artificial intelligence basically taking over everything. Like, her therapist is artificial intelligence. It's not a real person. You have these sort of nature pods because there isn't nature really in the cities and stuff anymore. You can't just go touch a tree or spend time in a park. All of that stuff is gone. A lot of that stuff has died. I think the majority of animals and things are gone. They do have a cat in this movie, but you don't see, like zoos or anything like that, at least not portrayed in the film. And you can go to like these nature pods and spend like 20 minutes listening to ocean sounds, but it's very sort of devoid of being around nature, having that connection with nature. And I think that is the underlying message of the film, is how important it is not to disconnect from nature and not to rely so heavily on cell phones or AI or apps or, what have you, and actually have like human connection and connection with nature and that sort of thing. However, I think that the pod generation in overall execution was done very poorly. Again, I don't think that the couple between Rachel and Alvy really mesh that well. Like, you see some moments of intimacy and stuff, but you don't ever see them, at least to me, in a way that is a realistic couple. They sort of seem like they're two entirely independent people that just sort of roommate together. And then in the end, they do end up kind of coming together and finding a way to like coexist and be in what I would consider a healthy relationship. But it isn't until they've sort of decided that they've made this drastic mistake with this pod, right? Or having a baby in that way. And I just, like, the movie itself, I want to say is almost 2 hours long. And by an hour in, I was just struggling to get the rest of the way through. Nothing happens. Like, it's very much dead and sort of empty of feeling or any kind of momentum in a storyline that you would typically expect to see there. I think that the message and the way that this is done could definitely have been carried out in a much better way. I'm thinking of that video game. I think it's called Death Stranding. I want to say that's the one. But where essentially, you know, babies are carried around in these sort of pods because it's dangerous to have them outside in the world. I didn't play the whole way through the game, so I can't exactly remember like why babies are in the pods. I just know Daryl Dixon had a baby in a pod. But like that storyline, at least a little bit of that game that I played, was to me far more compelling than the pod generation. Like, I could see them still making the same story, still coming to the same conclusions, but doing it in a way that was a little bit or a lot more interesting. Because this one isn't very interesting. It's very, again, like I said, just sort of dead, but it's just devoid of any kind of connection to the audience or even between characters. It's very artificial. And I don't know if that's done intentionally because, of course, these are people that survive mostly off of their lives being run by artificial intelligence. They don't even make their own food, you know? But I'm sort of comparing it in some ways to like Star Trek The Next Generation, where, you know, you can go to the little stand and you can order a coffee or whatever, and it just sort of materializes there. But those characters had more connection and more personality than many of the characters in the pod generation. So this one for me was not a win, and it's an unfortunate thing to see because I do really like Emilia Clarke. I would say the majority of the actors and actresses in this movie, though, are people that I have not heard of and people whose names, like whose character names, I won't even remember past tomorrow. Like, there's nothing and no connection between characters. None of the other characters, aside from Rachel and Alvy, really mean anything. Like, it is very singular towards their relationship. So it's hard to kind of see it as a well-rounded film that has anything really that an audience is going to get out of it. I would think that you are going to be far more bored watching it than you are going to be sort of interested in what's actually happening. Again, I just think the underlying message is good. The portrayal of it, the execution of it, not so much. So those are my thoughts on the pod generation. I would love to know yours if you watched this film. Subscribe if you want to join the Movie Nerd family, and I hope to see you in the next episode.